Friends, today's NRI Samai program from Los Angeles brought to you commercial-free by listeners like you. Your generous donations make possible for us to stay commercial-free, and today's show is pre-recorded. If you have a question for the guest, please send an email to nrisamai@gmail.com. We will follow up with the guest and find the answer for you. Thank you for your support.
Friends, welcome back to NRSMI. We have Liana Foxvog with us. We'll be talking about the accident in Bangladesh and why it's not just an accident, and it's a part of the series of accidents that's been happening. And so we want to see the patterns or who needs to take action basically to stop this. Because a lot of independent media is saying that this accident should absolutely be stopped. Now we know at least 500 people died in the accident, and this is some experts are saying that this is going to be the largest or the worst accident ever in the garment manufacturing industry. It's expected the death toll is expected to rise above 1,000 or even close to 1,400 people based on the number of people still under the rubble. And it's been more than 10 days, so the hopes are fading away. So Liana Foxvog is ILRF's, that's International Labor Rights Forum. She is a director of organizing and communications. In 2004, Liana's joined Sweat-Free Communities as a national organizer and has contributed to ILRF's campaigns in apparel industry since the merger of Sweat-Free Communities with ILRF in 2010. By leading workshops and strategy sessions, she has played a critical role in helping launch new grassroots campaigns for sweatshop-free purchasing. Previously, Liana worked for American Friends Service Committee, educating and mobilizing youth to take action against corporate globalization and for fairness in trade agreements. Liana has a BA in political science and MS in labor studies. She has taught courses on labor and global economy at the University of Massachusetts and served as a Spanish interpreter for immigrant rights and social injustice organizations. Liana represents ILRF on the board of directors of the Food Chains Workers Alliances. So welcome, Liana, to NRI Samai.
Liana, can you tell us that we have had this accident on April 23rd, which factory building for a garment factory in Bangladesh collapsed, and now we know at least 400 confirmed dead in it. Can you tell us what happened and why it's not just an accident?
Yes, absolutely. Well, so there's a pattern of problems that happened at the factory, and really it's one of many incidents that have happened in Bangladesh in the garment industry in recent years. This is certainly the deadliest incident, not only in Bangladesh, but in the worldwide garment industry. So it's a just absolutely horrific tragedy, but it's also a preventable tragedy. What we see here is a building owner who built building on top of a filled-in pond, and then later added 3 additional stories illegally to the building, and was in the middle of adding a 4th illegal story to make it a 9-story building. The day before the building collapsed, workers in the garment factories, in the 6 garment factories on site, reported to management their concerns about the cracks that had appeared in the building walls, saying, we don't want to come back to work tomorrow. But what some of those workers were told, at least at one of the factories, is that they would lose up to a month's pay if they didn't report to work the day after. And it was only 30 minutes after some of them had reported to work when the building collapsed. So what we're seeing here really is a denial of workers' right to refuse dangerous work. That's a human right that all of us have, is the right to refuse dangerous work, and it's what we saw happen at Rana Plaza. It's what we saw happen at Tazreen Fashions, which is another factory near Dhaka, which burned on November 24th, 2012, killing 112 workers. Some of those workers were on floors where once they smelled the smoke, they wanted to leave the building and escape down the stairwells. But on a couple of the floors, the supervisors and line managers actually closed the collapsible metal gates, locking workers inside behind padlocked doors and saying, "There's no fire, go back to work, keep up your production." But then later, when the smoke reached those floors and the supervisors realized it was actually a fire, then the supervisors escaped to save their own lives, leaving workers locked inside. And that's why we're talking about this as a denial of the human right to refuse dangerous work.
Yeah, I want to talk about Tazreen a little bit more, but before that I want to talk about, I did not hear about this version. I read some news, I heard some interviews, but I did not hear that they were actually building a floor already which is illegal, and that's probably the reason why this building collapsed. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, it was built on top of a filled-in pond, and so that is not a solid surface upon which to lay a foundation. And then they had already added 3 stories to the building illegally, and we're in the midst of adding, 1 more story. Much of this has been reported by the Daily Star in Bangladesh, and in fact on that website you can see diagrams of the building and of some of the foundation issues. But basically what happened is it all caved in because there wasn't a firm foundation.
Wow. And I saw the pictures, some of the pictures, and there were other buildings around, and they were kind of newly constructed too. So they are going to have problems too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not there on the ground, and I'm not an engineer, but it's, so crucial for factory building owners and factory managers to uphold the building and codes of the country, and for the government itself to make sure that those codes are being enforced and implemented, as well as for the U.S. and European brands and retailers to ensure that the factories that they choose to do business with are respecting local laws and international labor standards, including building codes.
Right. And you were talking about the fire accident in Tazreen, where more than 100 people died last November. That was, at the time, that was a huge news across several countries. And this one happened now, but these are not just two separate incidents, right? I think there were multiple that happened since then, but not as widely as reported. And
exactly.
Also,
yeah, there's been over 40 incidents in the Bangladesh garment industry since November. And there was another, one of them was a factory fire at a factory called Smart Garments, and they produced apparel for export as well, and 8 workers died in that factory fire. But there have been other incidents where workers heard some sort of explosion from the boiler, or there was a fire alarm or another small fire that started, and workers in stampeding and in their panic to get out of the building were actually injured, and to the point where before Rana Plaza happened, we had already counted around at least 600 injuries in garment factories due to these sorts of incidents just since November. So what we're looking at here, it's really a widespread problem in how these buildings are built and widespread problems of violations of Bangladesh's own fire and building safety codes, as well as international retailers and brands not upholding their own codes of conduct for working conditions and safety in their supply chains. And, these factories are really death traps, and they're really accidents waiting to happen. And that's why we're calling on retailers to join in a binding fire and building safety agreement to make sure that this never happens again, as well as calling on all the buyers from Tazreen and from Rana factories to pay the full and fair compensation that they owe to the victims.
Right. So the Rana Plaza is the one that collapsed on April 23rd, and you're talking about a huge crack which ran across, I think, 5 floors is what I read, and then they were building on top of it. So it's pretty evident for anybody that this building is going to collapse. But I mean, as an individual, as a human being, as the owner of, if I were the one that I know this is going to collapse, and I'm putting people in it. So it's like a lose-lose proposition, right? It's not going to, just because he wants people to work there and make money, it's not going to stay there. He knows that he or she, they should know that it's going to collapse. So why would they put people in it?
That's a very good question, and those are the questions that need to be asked of the building owner, as well as of the factory owners and the factory managers that told workers to report back the day after the cracks appeared. Those are absolutely the questions that we need to be asking, is why is there so much negligence happening?
But on a bigger picture, I'm trying to understand, is there a lot of competition in the environment? Because we know that factories from China, or at least the business from China, is moving to Bangladesh. And I don't know if there's enough infrastructure in place or not, but is there a lot of pressure on the factory owners from the retailers?
Yeah, I mean, when we look at who are the culpable parties, I think we're looking at 4 different parties in this case. We're looking at the building owner, we're looking at the factory owners, we're looking at the government of Bangladesh for not appropriately enforcing its own codes and laws, and we're looking at the multinational retailers brands that are using these factories, that are paying low prices to the factories, that are not ensuring that their own codes of conduct or that local labor laws are being upheld. And what you're indicating and pointing to, I think, is, absolutely that the factory owners feel so much pressure from the multinational retailers and brands to produce at quick turnaround with a lot of rush orders to produce for low prices. And that's why you see these cases where, even though there might be concern about the integrity of a building or about an alarm of a fire, that supervisors, time and again tell workers, just keep working because we need to churn out this production to keep on deadline for those multinational companies like Walmart, H&M, Gap, which are the 3 largest buyers from Bangladesh, as well as, all the other companies as well.
So one of the survivors from the fire accident last year, her name is Sumi. So she was in San Francisco, right? And can you tell us what was your involvement and what is she here for?
Yeah, so International Labor Rights Forum and our partner organizations, including United Students Against Sweatshops, SomeOfUs.org, Corporate Action Network, Warehouse Workers for Justice, and Making Change at Walmart, just wrapped up a 3-week 10-city tour with Shumi Abedin, who is a survivor of the Tazreen fire. And during that tour, we brought her message to lawmakers in Washington, D.C., D.C. to lawmakers at state levels in several states. We met with consumers and activists and students, spoke to hundreds of people, did many media interviews, as well as conducted protests in front of Gap stores and Walmart stores, including delegations to the Walmart headquarters in Arkansas, as well as a protest in front of Gap's headquarters in San Francisco. And the reason that we're focusing on Gap and Walmart is because they're two of the largest buyers from Bangladesh. Gap is seen as a leader in corporate social responsibility, and that's why we're urging them to be a leader in fire and building safety in Bangladesh, and to join this binding safety agreement that two other companies have already adopted, and to bring other companies together in doing the same. And on Walmart, we're urging them to join the fire safety agreement and also to pay the compensation that they owe to the victims of the Tazreen fire. Right now, we're also evaluating and doing research as to whether Walmart was in the supply chain for Rana Plaza. One of the factories, Ethertex, advertised that they were making product for Walmart Canada on their website, and we're still trying to track to figure out when's the last time that factory made products for Walmart, and should Walmart be held to account in the case of Rana Plaza as well.
So the agreements you were talking about, how much control or oversight these U.S. companies can have on what's going on in Bangladesh? Are those enforceable, you think?
Yes, the Bangladesh Fire and Building Safety Agreement that International Labor Rights Forum and a number of other organizations is promoting is a binding agreement for the brands and retailers to join, and it's co-signed by several unions in Bangladesh as well as international labor rights organizations. It's a binding agreement in which the companies agree to independent fire safety inspections, transparency, and publicly shared audit reports, as well as including worker representation and the oversight and implementation of the program. In addition, part of the program is that the brands need to pay higher prices to the factories so that the pricing is sufficient for there to be mandatory repairs and renovations to the buildings.
Friends, NRI Samay is a nonprofit independent alternate media from Los Angeles, USA, which brings positive stories from grassroots activists from all corners of India and across the world. NRI Samay does not rely on corporate funding, and our shows are commercial free. We only rely on your donations. Corporate funded media is driven by the TRP rating, and profits are blurring the distinction between news and entertainment. Why do our news channels talk so much about cricket, movies, accidents, popular figures' personal lives, babies of heroines, gossips, etc., while they should be covering the struggles of people, inequality in our society, rural issues, and border security issues? Why did our media raise some corruption crusaders to the sky on one day and shut them off completely when graft charges were raised on those corporate sponsors? Media relies so much on the corporate funding and government blessings that they cannot report independently. NRI Samay is different. We don't accept funds from any corporations, and hence our shows are commercial free. We completely rely on donations from you. Please consider donating to NRI Samay, and please go to nrisamay.com and donate generously. This is the only way together that we can continue NRI Samay. All donations are kept transparent on nrisamay.com. And if you have any questions, please write to nrisamay@gmail.com.
Okay. So entering into this agreement, Walmart or Gap, they would pay a little more to ensure the safety of the workers, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and we're talking about is 10 cents more per garment. That's the calculation that the Worker Rights Consortium has done, and that was also same calculation was done by Robert J.S. Ross, who's a professor at Clark University. And in addition, they would have to pay some money for the independent fire safety inspections. So it's a 2-year program that will kick off once 2 more apparel companies join. And right now the companies involved are PVH, which owns Tommy Hilfiger, Calvin Klein, and some other brands, and Chibo, a major German retailer.
Okay, so as a consumer, if Walmart or Gap told me that if I pay 10 more cents, then the workers can be safe, I would not think twice. So why is there? Why do you have to fight for these things? So, or is there any relationship between the tag price to the wages or the safety?
Yeah, I think you're right. Consumers would not think twice, and we've met with hundreds of consumers across the tour, who are people who are brought to tears when they hear Shumi's story and of escaping and jumping from the 3rd floor story of the building, and the person she jumped with died when they landed. They're brought to tears by that, and they're brought to tears by hearing what's happening right now with the Rana building collapse. So, our hope is that with sufficient consumer pressure that these brands will agree to joining this program and being held accountable to ensure improvement of working conditions for the workers in Bangladesh who make their clothing.
Okay. And I go to these website of Walmart or Gap or some Children's Place is one of them, I guess. So I see that kids are wearing these clothes and they're happy, they're playing. So that's the kind of perception that consumers get, right? So these are happy clothes and happy environment, and so probably they have no clue about the conditions of or the dangerous conditions that these clothes are made. So do you think there needs to be somebody needs to bridge this gap, and are consumers even worried about these things, or do they just ignore those things as long as they get the cheapest price?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we're trying to do is we're trying to bridge the gap, and my hope is with all the media coverage on that, this building collapse at Rana, this is bridging the gap as well. And I absolutely do believe that consumers, when they take the time to learn about the issues, when they hear the stories, when they meet Shumi in person, when they see the photos from Rana, when they hear the quotes from workers who've survived the building collapse in the news, that, consumers need to hear the stories, and then they will care, and then they will take action. And as as we're saying, it's only 10 cents more per garment that these companies need to pay. Certainly consumers are willing to pay a bit more.
I wanted to ask these workers working in these dangerous conditions, what is their livelihood like, or what are the options they have if they don't want to work in a garment factory because it's dangerous? And do they have any other option to go work somewhere else, or is this just the way it's supposed to be in Bangladesh?
Well, the garment industry is the most flourishing and rapidly growing export industry of the country. So, what we need is for the conditions to be improved. And many workers don't have other options, but what they want jobs, but they want jobs with dignity. They want jobs with respect. They don't want to have to fear for their lives at the workplace. They want living wages. And all of this is stuff that the U.S. and European brands and retailers can afford. Garments is about 78% of Bangladesh's exports, and it's really the cornerstone of Bangladesh's economy. And the workers in Bangladesh deserve more than poverty wages, exploitation, and unsafe workplaces. And the U.S. and European brands and retailers can really be the solution in providing a better life for millions of people in Bangladesh and helping raise them out of poverty.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Other point I wanted to understand is now that organizations like you and even probably in Bangladesh, they're asking for more reasonable environment and also wages. Do you think some people are afraid that these companies might ship or move to somewhere else, like how they are moving from China to Bangladesh? They can move to a poorer country and exploit situations there, right? Are they feared of those situations?
There's always that fear, but my question is, how realistic is that for Bangladesh? Yes, factories are closing in China and work is moving to Bangladesh. The minimum wage in China is the equivalent of $258 US, whereas the minimum wage in Bangladesh is $38 US, and we're talking about per month. $38 US per month. So my question is, where would the jobs go? There's some talk of perhaps jobs could go to Burma, but right now what we're seeing is Bangladesh, it's the lowest wage country in the world for the garment industry. The jobs aren't going anywhere, and workers, in Bangladesh are organizing for change, and workers in other countries are organizing for change. And so, it's certainly very important, I think, with our campaigns to make it clear that we're not boycotting these products, and we're not telling the garment factories to close down and to move. What we're saying is we're echoing the voices of workers and unions in Bangladesh who are standing up for dignity and justice and just respect for their basic humanity. And we're saying, the factories, should stay open, but they should be brought up to code with the local labor, the local building and fire safety codes, and workers' rights should be respected, both their right to form unions, their rights to refuse dangerous work, and they should have decent wages instead of poverty wages. And this is all possible if the U.S. and European retailers and brands do the right thing.
That's right. And so the owner of this factory, Rana Plaza, he was caught last night, right? I think last night in the border of India or even in India. Yeah. And so what kind of punishment can we expect, or what have we seen, for example, for the fire accident in Tazreen?
Well, the type of punishment, that's really up to Bangladesh's own system of justice. In terms of Tazreen, the factory owner at Tazreen has still not been arrested.
That's pretty sad. Is it because he has some immunity, or is it because he's not just caught?
Well, there can be different hypotheses. One of the hypotheses is because the factory was part of the BGMEA, the Bangladesh Garments and Manufacturers and Exporters Association.
I see. So what specific action from here that you have had 3-week tour in U.S. for multiple cities there. So what are the actions from here that your organization is planning?
Right. So right now, for this week, we have announced a week of action to stop the murders of garment workers. And one of the first actions is to sign the petition on our homepage at laborrights.org/safety. And this is a petition to the largest buyers of clothing from Bangladesh, H&M, Walmart, and Gap, calling on them to join the binding fire and building safety agreement. And we're also going to be asking consumers this week to do actions at Gap stores and to Walmart stores, bringing letters to the store managers and leafleting at stores to go directly to the face of the companies, to where the products are sold and bought, to let consumers and the companies know that we're demanding justice for workers.
All right. Before we wrap up this conversation, is there anything else you want to say?
There's one positive piece of news that just came across my desk while we were talking, which is that the company Primark, European brand, has announced that they are taking responsibility and that they will be paying compensation to the families of the victims of the Rana Plaza disaster. So that is very positive, and my hope is that other companies such as Mango, Benetton, The Children's Place, and Joe Fresh, which are just several of the dozens of companies that were currently doing business or had recently done business with the six factories in the building, that these other companies will soon join with Primark in paying compensation as well.
That is very positive news to end this conversation. So friends, that is Liana Foxvog from International Labor Rights Forum. We thank you very much for explaining the conditions and taking this action actually. So thank you very much.
Thanks to you.
Friends, if you liked today's show, please go to youtube.com/NRI Samay and click on the subscribe button. You will get notified every time we publish a new show. And you can also like us on our social media sites like Facebook, Twitter, and Google+.